All right, college football and stuff here. It's week 9 of the 2021 college football season, and we're making up for kind of a down week, at least matchup wise, last week with some really good games this week. All right, jumping right into the games. First up, I'm talking about Michigan at Michigan State, two undefeated teams. Michigan, a 4-point favorite in this game. I think this is going to be a great game. I think it is absolutely ridiculous that this is an early morning game. This should be a primetime game. These are two very, very evenly matched teams stats wise. About the same average points per game, very, very similar yards per play, and very evenly matched defenses as well. Both have above average but not elite defenses. They both play well on defense. Neither of them is elite. Um, the big differences in these teams, Michigan has really relied on the run game, especially early on in the season. They've kind of gone away from that a little bit, I think, as teams have keyed in on that and tried to stop the run more. And Michigan State is a more balanced offense. They have really been about 50-50 pass attempts to run attempts. I think that does help them in this game. I think this is going to be a really good game. I think this game is a toss-up. I think this is one of those games where almost no result would surprise me. Um, yeah, I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a good game. Um, I think the big issue here is uh, Michigan was not going to be able to be a one-dimensional team in this game. They cannot only run the ball and expect to win this. Um, can Michigan State take advantage of that, though? Michigan has done a really, really good job. I think the biggest difference between these two defenses is how good of a job Michigan has done of limiting people points wise for the amount of yards that they've gained. They've given up yards, but they haven't given up points. They've been a much better team holding teams to less than their point averages than Michigan State has. And Michigan State has two really, really bad offensive games. Their game against Nebraska and their game against Indiana. They were not able to get anything going on offense in those games. Now, they won those games. They won it on the back of their defense. I think there's a chance here if Michigan can limit Michigan State the way they were limited against Nebraska, against Indiana. I don't think Michigan State can win. I think Michigan is going to do a better job of scoring points. I think the big question is, how does Michigan State's offense come out? Now they have a definite benefit here of being a more balanced offense. In the games against Nebraska and Indiana, though, they did not run the ball well. If Michigan limits them running and forces them to be a pass-only team, I do not think they are built well to handle that. Michigan has had a good pass defense. They've had some really good turnover play against some of these teams. That could be the difference here. I think if Michigan holds them, this can turn into a blowout for Michigan. For that reason, even though it's at Michigan State, it is an early morning game. I'm sure it's a rivalry game. The crowd will be in it, but I do think they won't be as in it as they would be if this was a night game. I'm going to take Michigan plus the 4 points again. I'm not super confident in it. I think this is going to be a great game. And I think this game could go pretty much any way. I don't think that there is an outcome that would really surprise me. A blowout for Michigan State wouldn't be earth shattering to me. I think this is going to be a great game. I think it's going to be a super good game. I am taking Michigan minus the 4 points, though. I do think they're able to get it done. But on to big game in the SEC. A nice rivalry game. Georgia versus Florida. Technically a neutral site, even though it's definitely much closer to being a home game for Florida than it is for Georgia, but that's where they play it. I think this will be a fun game to watch as well. Now, absolutely, without a doubt, I think I felt this way for weeks, and the polls are finally starting to catch up. Georgia is obviously the best team in the country right now. I don't think there's really any question about that. I would pick Georgia on a neutral field to beat any other team in the country this weekend. Now, on the other side, Florida did not look good in their loss to LSU. Now, part of that, I don't put it past Dan Mullen to take an extra week to prep for this Georgia game and really just overlook LSU. And I think you saw that in the LSU game last year between Florida and LSU, where the outcome of that game didn't matter as far as whether Florida was going to go to the SEC championship, and they lost to a terrible LSU team in a really bad game. And I don't know if we're seeing the same thing this year. Now, Florida turned around and gave Alabama pretty much all they could handle in that SEC championship game. Do we see the same thing here, where Florida comes out and just looks like a well-prepared, good team to get some early strikes? I do think that is what Florida will have to do to have any chance in this game. Now, I don't really think Florida has a chance to win this. I think Georgia is a good enough team that Georgia is going to win. Now, I think there's a chance Florida keeps it close. I know, so they've said that Anthony Richardson is going to be starting for Florida. I know fans are really happy about that. I don't know. Now, in general, I trust Dan Mullen to have a good feel for his offense and his quarterbacks. I don't know if he's given into outside pressure here, though. Now, Anthony Richardson has looked like the better quarterback, but you see that a lot in teams where there's a young guy who doesn't have a bunch of pressure on him because he's not the starter. He can go out there and just play. And other teams don't have a lot of tape on him and they're preparing for the other guy. And once teams get tape on that backup quarterback, or the new guy comes in and starts playing, you really don't see the same production out of him. And I don't know if this is the game to test that on, because Georgia's defense is so good. And they might be able to force some bad mistakes out of a young quarterback who doesn't have a lot of playing experience, and threw some bad picks in that LSU game. I personally think they should be trusting Emory Jones, but I don't think there's any argument here that Anthony Richardson is probably the more talented overall quarterback and the more explosive player. And that is, I mean, really, Florida is going to have to find a way to score some points. They need to make this game a higher scoring shootout kind of game. They need to get in there, score early, get up, force Georgia to play comeback. That is something Georgia has not had to do at all this season. And I think that's team's only chance against Georgia right now, because Georgia's not really shown the ability to to score a ton of points outside of some of these games where really like the other team has just given up. They haven't been in a situation where they have had to score points to win a game. I think testing them there is Florida's best bet. Now, all that said, I don't think Florida can get the win. I think this game is going to be closer than the spread, though. I think this is going to be one of those games where it's fairly low scoring and the game looks like it was a lot closer based on the final score than it really ever felt when you were watching this game. I think this is going to be a game probably in the 10 to 14 point range. I don't really think it's going to end up more than a 14-point spread. But I think it's going to be one of those games where you're going to watch it and you're never going to feel like there's any doubt that Georgia wins. So yeah, I really think somewhere about 10 points is where this game ends up. That is within the spread. I am going to take Florida plus the 10. I do think it is much more likely that Georgia covers than Florida wins, though. I'm taking Florida plus the 10 points in this one. Not super confident on that. I think that is really going to come down to Florida getting some early points and them having spent an extra week preparing for this game. Moving on, another SEC game, Ole Miss at Auburn. A top 10 Ole Miss going to the Plains to face Auburn. Auburn a 2.5-point favorite. Slightly surprised that Auburn is the favorite in this game. I think Ole Miss is the better team, but they're coming off a really, really tough stretch of games, and I think that's the reason you're seeing this point spread where it is. Auburn looked really good against Arkansas and then had a bye week to prep for this game. I think that puts them in a really good spot. I think that's the difference in this game. If this game was played 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think Ole Miss would be an easy favorite, and Ole Miss should win that game. I think Auburn is getting very lucky here in the placement of this game. So Auburn is going to have to limit Matt Corral on the ground. I think that's going to be the key. We saw him in especially the Tennessee game, really long runs, third and long situations. He's able to get out of the pocket, get a first down. He ran really well in that game. Auburn has to stop that. I think they've got to be willing to give up some yards to Ole Miss's running backs in order to limit Matt Corral. I think that's got to be something they're willing to give up on a little bit, because I think Matt Corral has more explosive play ability than Ole Miss's running backs do. And I think they've got to play a similar game plan to what they did in the Arkansas game, where they're willing to give up the run game a little bit in order to prevent the quarterback from beating them. I think Ole Miss is going to have to slow down Auburn a little bit, especially the run game. Ole Miss has not been good against the run. Now, teams have really keyed in on Auburn's run game, and they've done a good job of passing the ball lately. It'll be interesting to see if Ole Miss follows the same defensive game plan that Arkansas did. So this season, Ole Miss and Arkansas run very similar defenses. They have a 3-man front and they drop people into coverage. Arkansas did not do that against Auburn. They changed it up. They ran a 4-man front. They put people in the box. They dared Auburn to beat them in the air, and Auburn beat them with a short passing game and some explosive plays. But really, the run game was not the difference in that game. Um, I'm interested to see if Ole Miss will try a similar thing. If they will also put more men on the line of scrimmage, put more people in the box, force Auburn to beat them passing. I think there's a chance that that works. I think if Auburn is able to run the ball well, I don't think Ole Miss has a good shot in this game because Auburn is going to be able to control time of possession. They can then hopefully, I think the key for Auburn here is they want this game to be like the Arkansas Auburn game was or like the Ole Miss Alabama game was. They want Ole Miss to feel like they need to go for it on some fourth downs, and Auburn is going to need to get some stops. They need to prevent Ole Miss from scoring points. I think if Ole Miss scores 35 or more, Auburn probably does not win this game. I think this is going to need to be a game where Auburn holds Ole Miss under 30, and Auburn hopes to get something 35, 38, very similar to the Arkansas game. Yeah, so keys for Auburn, get some fourth down stops or some turnovers, consistently score points, hopefully on long drives where you eat up a lot of clock, take time of possession, limit the number of offensive chances Ole Miss is going to have. I think that's the big key for Auburn here. I do think Auburn is going to get the win. I think the key is this really, really tough stretch of games Ole Miss has been on at Alabama, Arkansas at home, Tennessee, LSU. That is a tough stretch. A lot of those were close games. I think Ole Miss's defense is going to be a little bit worn out. I think that helps Auburn in the run game. I think that helps Auburn overall. I think Auburn gets really, really lucky with the timing of this game here and gets what's going to look like a really good win. A top 10 team coming to you, getting the win. I'm taking Auburn minus the 2.5 points. But again, I really think this is a timing game, and Auburn is getting lucky here. I think a couple of weeks later, Ole Miss had their bye too early this season. If this game got played earlier in the season, I think Ole Miss gets the win. But this is what it is, and I think Auburn gets a nice win here. Moving on, another nice matchup, something that lost a little bit of its luster after a really sad game last week. We have Penn State at Ohio State. Ohio State an 18.5-point favorite. That Penn State Illinois game was sad. That was a rough game. Nobody looked good in that game. I was really, really surprised at how terrible Penn State's offense looked in that game. Now, Penn State their defense has played pretty well, and their defense played well in that game, but their offense just could not do anything. On the other side, Ohio State has been rolling since their early season struggles, especially that loss to Oregon. Ohio State has looked like a completely different team lately. They are putting up points, and they are looking like the unstoppable team on offense people kind of assumed that they would be. Now, similar to, I guess, what I think about Florida in that LSU game, did Penn State get caught looking ahead? Did they not take the Illinois game seriously? Did they do extra prep for Ohio State instead of prepping for that Illinois game? And was that a trap game? Penn State has shown the ability to score points. They put up points in a few games. Now, they are not the explosive offense that Ohio State is. But they really, really should not have lost that game to Illinois, and they shouldn't have lost it in the way they did. Penn Penn State has a pretty good defense. I don't think Ohio State is scoring in the 50s like they have in some of these games. But this is at Ohio State. I don't think I trust Penn State enough. Ohio State really, they have such an ability to create explosive plays. They have such good athletes at skill positions. I think that makes this a really tough game for Penn State. So I think Penn State is able to limit them some, but I think the difference in this game is going to be a couple of explosive plays on the Ohio State side. I don't think Penn State is going to be able to get enough. I think there's a chance if Penn State can limit the explosive plays and plays really well on defense, if they get some turnovers, if they find a way to sort of limit or shut down that Ohio State offense, Penn State has a chance in this game. I think the spread is really close to what it should be, though. It's a bunch of points. 18.5 points is a lot of points. I think Penn State's defense is going to be just good enough to keep it under that. I think that is maybe even just a half a point too high in the spread. I think this is somewhere around a 14 to 18 point game. I don't think Penn State is able to get a win. I think they're able to keep it just close enough. Just close enough. I would not be surprised by an 18-point win here by Ohio State. Maybe a 17-point win, two touchdowns and a field goal. I am going to take Penn State plus the 18.5. That really is me trusting their defense to get just enough to keep Ohio State from completely blowing this game away. And they get just enough on offense to keep it respectable. I do think it's a 2-touchdown win for Ohio State there, and a game that is not really going to be in jeopardy. So I think Ohio State gets the win easy. I do think Penn State keeps it just close enough. So Penn State plus the 18.5. All right, last up this week, North Carolina at Notre Dame. Notre Dame, a 3.5-point favorite. And this is another game, just like last week. I was really surprised that Notre Dame was under a touchdown favorite over USC. And the same thing here. I think 3.5 points just really isn't enough. And I have not really been impressed with this North Carolina team. They had some really, really big preseason expectations, and they just have not been a consistent team. They've put some good games together, but they've also just had some completely mind-boggling losses here. Now, North Carolina is definitely a better team than USC. I do think this is a closer game than the Notre Dame USC game was. But I just do not trust North Carolina. They need to be able to turn yards into points. They haven't been able to do that consistently. They've had games where they moved the ball well, and they just did not score points. Some of that's been turnovers. The biggest issues I have with North Carolina are the losses to Florida State and Georgia Tech and that close game with Miami. Those games really, really scare me if I'm a North Carolina fan. Those are games North Carolina should have won, the two they lost, and they really should have won that Miami game by more. They let Miami come back, almost win it late in the game. So North Carolina has to shut down Notre Dame's run game. They have to make Notre Dame a one-dimensional team. Now, they have to really shut down Notre Dame's run game. I think if Notre Dame gets anything respectable at all running the ball, so 3.5 to 4 yards per carry, I think Notre Dame wins. If they fall under that, or North Carolina can get some turnovers, North Carolina could pull an upset here. Again, I just don't trust North Carolina. Those losses really bother me. It's at Notre Dame. It's a night game. I think the crowd will be in it. North Carolina has not played great on the road this year. I think Notre Dame has the better path to victory in this game. The consistency issues really are what bother me about this game. It makes it a tough game to pick because I think if North Carolina plays one of their good games, I think they have a shot of at least keeping this game close. But at the same time, I think they have just as much of a shot of losing by 2 or 3 scores if they play a game like the game they played against Georgia Tech. So I really, really don't know here. But I think I've got to go with the more consistent team, the home team. I think Notre Dame gets it done. I think this spread should be closer to a touchdown. I thought the Notre Dame USC spread should have been closer to 10 points. Yeah, I think this should be the 6.5 or 7 that the USC game was. So give me Notre Dame minus the 3.5 points. I think they're able to get it done. All right, that's it for my picks this week. Let me know in the comments if you think I got any of these wrong, or give me your picks on these games. And if you have any other games I didn't cover that you're interested in hearing my opinion on, leave a comment. I'll try to get to it before Saturday. And otherwise, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.